The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Yvonne Unruh. I am the Director for the Center of Fostering Success at Western Michigan University. We're delighted that you could join us today. I want to let you know that the mission of the Center for Fostering Success is to improve college graduation and career achievement rates among youth and young adults ages 12 to 25 years old who are aging out of the foster care system. We're delighted to bring you this webinar series called Best Practice, Best Fit. And the aim of the webinar series is to provide helping professionals, students, and supportive adults discovery-driven solutions related to educational attainment for students from foster care. We want to acknowledge our funders, the Kresge Foundation, the Havermill Foundation, and Western Michigan University are making this webinar series possible. We're absolutely delighted to have Dr. Amy Salazar as our first speaker, who will be talking on a presentation about salient factors related to post-secondary retention and the value of the college degree for foster care alumni. Before we introduce Dr. Salazar, I just wish to put a call out there if there are other researchers on the webinar today, that if you have a research study that you feel fits our series and you would like to be considered for a future presentation webinar slot, for you, please contact me with your ideas. And at the end of the webinar, you will see my name and contact information. So thank you for coming. And the person we have introducing our inaugural speaker today is Graduate Assistant Sarah Graff.
Dr. Amy Salazar is a research scientist at the Social Development Research Group in the University of Washington School of Social Work and a licensed social worker in the state of Oregon. Amy's area of interest is improving the outcomes of youth aging out of the foster care system, most specifically in relation to increasing access to and success in higher education. She has practice experience in a variety of settings, including independent living services for youth in foster care, post-secondary mentoring for youth in foster care and youth with disabilities, and county mental health services. She currently works on several research and evaluation projects focusing on improving services and supports for young people in the child welfare system. And now we'll be handing it over to Amy.
Thanks, Sarah, for that introduction. So hi, everyone. Today I will be presenting two papers that I have that summarize some of the research that I've been doing in this area about young people who have spent time in foster care participating in college. The first one focuses on these young people's experiences during college and some of the predictors of college disengagement or dropout from college. And then the second one looks more at how these young people are doing after college compared with some of their general population peers. And I believe that you have so of course, this is two papers within a pretty short period of time, so we'll have to skip over some of the real details of the papers, but the citations for both of these papers are on the webinar handout, so you can definitely look those up if you'd like to go a little bit more deeply into either of these studies. Okay, so first I would just like to acknowledge a couple of organizations who really made this work possible. First, Casey Family Programs and the Foster Care to Success, which was formerly known as the Orphan Foundation of America. These two organizations together run a really great scholarship program for young people who have spent time in foster care, and I work closely with both of them to gain access to the young people who participated in the study. Okay, so first just a little bit of background information, which a lot of you probably are familiar with, given that a lot of your experience working with young people who have been in foster care. So youth who have spent time in foster care as a group tend to struggle at all levels of education, from K-12 up through post-secondary education, but especially in the post-secondary realm. Only about, I'll say 3 to 11% of foster care alumni successfully complete a bachelor's degree. It's a little bit challenging to get a really good estimate of this, but, given that there's not, we sort of pull these estimates together from a lot of different studies. But the guess now, or the estimate now, is about 3 to 11% of foster care alumni successfully complete a bachelor's degree, compared with about 28% of adults in the general population. However, when you ask young people in foster care, are you interested in going to college? Do you want to go to college? Is that something that you want to do? Most do say yes. Studies have found that over 70% actually of young people who have been in foster care express an interest and a desire to go to college. And this aspiration piece is actually something that will be coming up at one of the next webinars in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, and how aspirations and college readiness are related. So that will be coming up in one of the next webinars. So as most of you probably know, having a post-secondary degree has really become more and more important in the United States in terms of job security, having a living wage or a higher salary, earning power. It's related to quite a few outcomes: health, mental health, quality of life. Quite a few elements are related to having a post-secondary degree. And obviously this is something that we want the young people who have spent time in foster care to experience as well. And adults who have spent time in foster care, as they're approaching young adulthood, which we have well documented, continue to face quite a few challenges that hopefully or ideally a college degree could help mediate. So the study that or the two studies that I'm talking about today, as I said earlier, are broken down into two papers. So the first one, the overall goal is to identify predictors of post-secondary disengagement for youth with foster care experience. And here disengagement is defined as either taking time off from a college program or starting a program but not completing it. And then the second goal of this presentation is to compare the early adult outcomes, so about age 25, 26, adult outcomes of foster care alumni who have graduated from college, with other general population samples, national samples of general population young people who have graduated from college, to sort of explore how how similar and different these populations are looking after graduating from college. So how I accessed the population for this study. For this study, I did an online survey with 325 foster care alumni, and all of these young people participated, as I said earlier, in the Casey Family Scholarship Program or the Foster Care to Success Post-Secondary Scholarship Programs. And by the time I did the survey with them, they had either successfully graduated from college or they had exited the scholarship program prior to graduation. So by the time I spoke with them, they were already finished. They weren't currently participating in the degree that I was asking them about. So I used an online survey for data collection, and it was a combination of instruments that other studies had used and also some that I created if there weren't measures already out there that really met the needs of what I was trying to evaluate. And we started out, so I did the survey with 329 young people, as I said. We actually started out by emailing about 764 foster care alumni, and 329 participated in the survey, so our response rate was 43%. Which isn't great for some studies, but for this population and reaching out and doing an online survey, we were actually really happy with that. Okay, so the participants, these are just sharing some of the demographics of the participants who participated in the study. So majority were female, and I just wanted to say about that, there are actually more females in the scholarship program as well, so this is actually pretty representative of scholarship recipients that we're representing in the study. So the participants at the time of the survey, as I said earlier, were about in mid-20s. and most had completed a bachelor's degree or higher. So a very successful group of students, which we'll talk about more in a little while, how representative is this. So very high achievers. They had spent an average of about 9 years in foster care and had about an average of about 5 placements each. So, pretty typical of the foster care experience. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the part 1, which is the predictors of post-secondary retention. So the first two, these next 2 slides that I'm showing show quite a long list of potential predictors that I looked at in the study. So there were a lot of different predictors that just looking through the literature could potentially predict disengaging from college for this population. These predictors come from a variety of sources. Some are predictors of college and disengagement in the general population or other at-risk populations, while others, such as things like trauma or maltreatment, may have been found to be predictors of other negative outcomes for young people in foster care specifically, and I wanted to pull them in and see if they were also significant predictors for college disengagement as well. So the first page of factors is, I broke down into academic skills, college fit, and maltreatment, trauma, and mental health. And then the next page of slides, or of predictors, is independent living stability factors, and then several support-related factors. So quite a few factors that I looked at in this study. And again, on this next slide with the independent living stability and support, these also came from a variety of different sources. So looking at the analysis procedure, the first step was just doing logistic regressions with each factor individually to test whether each factor had a relationship with college disengagement. So for example, I'll go back for a second. The first one in the independent living stability is financial skills. So is there a relationship between financial skills and dropping out of college? So I went through and did that with each factor individually just to test the bivariate relationship. And the paper, which if you can look up if you're interested, actually goes into another regression step, which pulls together all of the factors into sort of a larger analysis. But today I'm just going to look at, focus on each factor individually being tested for its relationship with college disengagement. Okay, so let's just jump into some of the results. So the next 3 slides contain the results for those comparisons with all of that long list of factors that we looked at previously in their relationship to college disengagement. So just to orient you to what the findings mean, all the factors that have odds ratios beside them, such as time management skills, study skills, problem-solving skills, either have a significant or trend level relationship with disengaging from college, and trend level just means sort of borderline significant. And those that weren't significant are listed in the box at the end of each section. For example, if you see where it says non-significant, leadership skills, communication skills, college credit earned in high school, I didn't find a significant relationship between college disengagement and those factors. And so if the odds ratio is less than 1, for example, for the first one, time management skills, the odds ratio is 0.69. That means that the higher that students were on that construct, the less likely they were to disengage. So for example, the better time management skills that young people had, the less likely that they were to disengage from college. So I found quite a few significant relationships here between college disengagement and these different factors. Let's see. So academic skills factors, there was time management skills, study skills, problem-solving skills, and then quite a few various college fit factors as well. And we'll come back to in a little while when we're talking about some sort of the meaning of these findings, is these different realms of factors and what you might be able to do with those when you're setting up interventions. So all of these have an odds ratio that's less than 1, which means the higher that young people are on these factors, the less likely they are to disengage. But when we go to the next slide, looking at things like trauma, PTSD, things like that. If the odds ratio is more than 1, for example, with trauma symptom count or PTS screen being positive, that means that the higher students are on these constructs, the more likely they are to disengage. So the higher young people were on the trauma symptom count, the more likely they would be to disengage from college. Okay, so again, quite a few factors in the maltreatment, trauma, mental health realm of factors proved to be important for college disengagement. Not so many of the factors that I had classified under independent living stability. The only one that popped up in that category was hours worked per week during college. So the more hours young people were working during college, the more likely it was that they would disengage from college. So then the third slide of results are the support factors. So several of these support factors emerged as being significant or trend level, and some didn't. So social support, having a caring adult while in college, a lot of the things that, you know, if you have a little bit, if you're a little bit oriented within in this area of work, you say, well, of course, that makes sense. A lot of other studies that look at young people aging out of foster care really look into this. Do you have a caring adult in your life supporting you? So a lot of these, you know, make intuitive sense. It's also worth noting as we look at these different slides of results that some of these factors that weren't found to be significant could have played a key role in preventing young people from getting to college in the first place, and that may explain why they're not showing up in this study as being significant. So for example, if we go back to, right here on this slide, education level of guardians or untreated health problems, we're not finding those as being significant predictors of college disengagement in this study. But maybe if you looked at college enrollment or college access, maybe they would have been significant there, differentiating those who did and did not actually go to college in the first place, but may have been less important here when you're looking at young people who are already in college. Okay. So in summary, and I know that was a lot of information to take in pretty quickly, but in summary, youth who have spent time in foster care, as we know, experience a lot of different factors that could be really supportive of their college experience or that could continue to really interfere with the success that they experience in college. So through this study, I found quite a few factors that did have significant relationships with college disengagement, some that didn't. So quite a few factors that, if these factors are differentiating those who do and don't drop out of college, maybe this is something that we could use to start building or focusing our interventions on for these young people. So I just want to point out a few limitations of this study, as every study has. So this is a quite high achieving group of young people. They're primarily bachelor's degree earners. As you all know who work in the field, earning, and as I said in the statistics I reported at the beginning of the study, earning a bachelor's degree when you've been in foster care is definitely not the typical outcome. Although we want it to be, it just isn't right now. It's not the typical outcome for these young people. So it's a very high achieving group. It's also bachelor's degree earners as opposed to, for example, community college associate's degree earners, which is more common for young people who have been in foster care, at least through the years immediately following high school. Another limitation of this study is that it relies on retrospective reporting, which is sort of, these young people had already either completed their college degree or had dropped out, so they were sort of thinking back and thinking about what was difficult for them or what their experiences was like. And this is an important thing to think about because, for example, a student who disengaged from college might look back and be more likely to say, oh no, I didn't have enough academic support. Whereas if they hadn't disengaged from college, they might have not have felt that way about it, even if their situation was the same. So that's the tricky thing about retrospective reporting, or sort of reporting from what happened a while ago. Another challenge or limitation of the study is that it was cross-sectional, so you can't really determine causality from a design like this. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the 43% response rate. So if we had gotten all, maybe it's, it's possible that those 57% of participants, or of young people who didn't participate, their experience could have looked a lot different. So maybe it could have made the results that I found not be as accurate as if we had everyone included. Okay, so just a couple of conclusions that I pulled from this study, and I'll talk about a few conclusions here, and then more conclusions as we get through sort of both of the studies. So there are several factors that were significant, as we've seen in this study, that are similar to those found in the general population. For example, academic skills matter for everyone, not just general population use, not just young people in foster care. They're pretty key across the board, social involvement, things like that. But other factors that I found to be important, things like trauma, maltreatment histories. Of course, these could be applicable to young people in other populations, but they don't seem to be as problematic as frequently for other populations, so they don't always become the subject of or focus on in an intervention, for example. So approaches, and so the last point that I wanted to say here is that approaches that go beyond logistical support and really start looking at relationships and integrating young people into that college life seem necessary, in addition to the logistical support that we often try to provide. And a variety of approaches that go beyond logistical support are starting to pop up. For example, the Center for Fostering Success at Western Michigan University, which is hosting this webinar, is doing a lot of really great work in providing this approach to service that goes beyond logistical support, as well as a lot of other campus support programs across the country in a lot of different states are popping up now. Okay, so now we're going to move to part 2, which I'll just remind you is the post-college life circumstances. So in part 1, we looked at some of the predictors of dropping out of college once you're there, and now we're going to look at the young people who were in my study who graduated successfully and what their lives are looking like, their circumstances are looking like compared to the general population. Okay, so for this study, I compared 2 groups. The first group were the foster care alumni, the scholarship recipients, same young people that we were just talking about, just those who completed a bachelor's degree, so 250 of those. And then I compared their young adult outcomes to general population bachelor's degree graduates in the same age range. From some national surveys, one being the General Social Survey, and the other is the Panel Study of Income Dynamics. So these samples, each of these 2 other national samples look at a variety of different young adult outcomes, so that's why I included a couple of different ones. For example, the Panel Study of Income Dynamics looks at public assistance use, whereas the General Social Survey doesn't. Okay, so for the analysis procedure here, I just compared the 2 groups in relation to their post-college life experiences and circumstances. And again, if you want, I really tried to keep it pretty basic for this presentation so we wouldn't get bogged down in the statistics, but if you want more information, you can definitely look at the paper that the citations included on the webinar handout. But for this study, I did logistic regressions for dichotomous outcomes and then ANOVAs for continuous outcomes. And I controlled for age, race, and gender because, as you know, the foster care population is quite diverse. It has very different race and gender compositions than, or especially race compositions than general population. So it was important to control for those pieces so the results would be comparable. Okay, so let's look at the results of some of these outcomes. So all of these outcomes on the first page are from the General Social Survey. Actually, the only outcome that's from the panel study of in-kind dynamics is public assistance use, which we'll look at next. So for these comparisons, I just put stars in the group, that last column that says group comparisons. I just used stars and carets to indicate whether there were significant differences, because I used a lot of different statistical tests, and I didn't want to get bogged down in that right now. So for these scales, just so you know, for example, job satisfaction, where it says 1 to 4, job security 1 to 4, the higher the number, the better the job satisfaction or the job security. So if you look at, for example, job satisfaction, the scores aren't all that different for the two groups, slightly different, both a little bit for job satisfaction job security a little bit lower for foster care graduates and general population graduates, not too much though. But the difference between job security was a statistically significant, and a trend level difference for job satisfaction. The income and residence comparisons are interesting. I'll skip down to own home first. The rate of home ownership for foster care graduates was much lower than that for general population graduates. And keep in mind, this is controlling for age, race, and gender. So much lower home ownership rates for foster care graduates. And obviously, if you think about any of these factors, there's so many reasons why this happened. For example, maybe young people who've been in foster care they don't have the parents to, co-sign the home loan as general population graduates may, and different things like that, or to help with the down payment. A lot of factors to explain those differences. Financial satisfaction, different for the two groups. Both groups were pretty well satisfied, or had similar rates of being pretty well satisfied, but if you look at not satisfied and somewhat satisfied, the foster care graduates, for those two categories, were less satisfied with their financial situation. The individual and household income comparisons are interesting. These surveys did come from different years, so you have to take that into account, that it's difficult to compare income over, if you're not looking at the exact same year. But what's interesting, even if you can't compare them directly, is that household income for foster care graduates, and I'll say here too, this also controlled for the number of adults in the household, didn't increase very much if you changed to household income, but increased quite a bit if you looked at household income for general population graduates. And when you control for the number of adults in the household, that means that you sort of take that out, that factor out as mattering. So it appears that general population graduates have much higher household incomes, even if you account for the number of adults in the household, than foster care graduates do. Okay, so now this is the second and last slide of results for this second paper. There's health and mental health outcomes, and then there's public assistance use. So the health ratings, oh, and I'll just say again, when it says health rating 1 to 4, again, the higher the rating, the better. So foster care graduates, or foster care alumni graduates, reported slightly lower health ratings, not a huge difference, but statistically significant. But the mental health rating, so the question here was how many days in the last month, in the last 30 days, was your mental health? I think the question was your mental health not good or something? It was a pretty basic question. It wasn't a diagnostic interview or anything, or anything like that. But foster care alumni reported quite higher number for this than the general population graduates, so about 3 times higher than the general population graduates, which is discouraging. But again, it was just the one question. It would be interesting to sort of look more deeply into a diagnostic interview or something like that to get a bigger picture on this. And then happiness, this was also statistically significant, where more general population graduates reported being very happy, but not a huge difference, a little bit. And then finally, the last comparison was public assistance use, and this is, like as I said before, this is the only comparison I got from the panel study of income dynamics. This was, I think the question was, has anyone in your household used state or local welfare, SSI, or any other type of public assistance, used by the household? And surprisingly, and I went back and checked this several times because I didn't believe it when I did it, but 0% of the general population graduates in the panel study of income dynamics reported using any of these public assistance use, which I thought was really curious, but as I said, I went back and checked it and it was true, whereas 10% of young people who foster care graduates reported using one of these types of public assistance, which obviously was a big difference. Okay, so in summary, the foster care alumni who completed college did appear to be experiencing some of the same benefits as the general population. I'll talk about one of the limitations of the fact that we don't have the comparison groups of foster care alumni who didn't go to college and general population who didn't go to college. That would make it a better comparison. But these young people did appear to be close to on par, especially when you look at some of the outcomes such as job satisfaction. But there were quite a few differences between the findings of these two groups, which suggests that foster care alumni may continue to struggle even after achieving that college degree when you compare them with the general population. Okay, and one notable struggle, as you all probably noticed, was the mental health piece, which, as I said, it would be interesting to sort of delve into that a little bit deeper, but is concerning. So a few limitations of this part of the study, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, is there wasn't a group of foster care alumni who did not graduate from college to compare the results with. My sample was scholarship recipients, and there wasn't a comparable group of foster care alumni who wasn't graduating from college to compare results with. Also, as I think I mentioned during part of the presentation, is the data was from different years. This could have an impact, especially as I was talking about on those income comparisons. I actually believe when I collected the foster care sample, it was at the end. It was sort of right in the middle of the recession, so that could definitely have an impact on those comparisons as well. And then, the foster care alumni data, the general social survey, the panel study of income dynamics, all of these use different data collection procedures. My sample wasn't randomly chosen, so differences between the different data sets. Comparing those, there's obviously some limitations that you'd want to consider. So it would be really, I think, a great next step for this would be to be able to compare 4 groups: foster care alumni who did and didn't graduate from college, and then general population who did and didn't graduate from college. I think would produce the best comparison for these sort of mid-20s outcomes and how college is impacting these outcomes. Another thing that would be nice would be to compare foster care alumni who graduated with an associate's or vocational degree. As I was saying earlier, that's a lot more common for young people who have been in foster care, and see how those outcomes compare with young people in foster care who didn't go to college or young people in foster care who graduated with a 4-year degree. Okay, so in conclusion for this paper, as it seems, foster care alumni it appears that they're still struggling or falling a little bit behind their general population counterparts in some of these post-college circumstances. So it's possible that additional post-graduation or transition supports may still be needed to achieve, to really be on a level playing field with their peers. So I listed a few possible next steps for, I think that anyone who works in this field knows that this is a population that's up against a lot of struggles and a lot of challenges. And so it's not really surprising that the challenges appear to be going into young adulthood. So a few possible next steps that I listed here. The first one is evaluating and implementing evidence-based practices to better serve transition-aged youth. There are a lot of really great programs popping up. There's college support programs. Some independent living programs offer services and supports to their young people who go to college. A lot of different kind of programs that people are offering, but not very many are evaluating their programs to actually see if youth outcomes are actually getting better as a result of them. That's just, and that's due to a lot of things. One being, a lack of resources to really put into evaluation. But the programs that are starting up, one thing that they can use information like this from this current study, these programs can use information like this to sort of think about, well, what do we want to focus on for our programming? What factors could we really think about that young people are experiencing to better design our services that we're offering? So another possible next step is creating community supports and networks. Young people who are going to college, who have been in foster care, often don't have that support structure of a family that young people who haven't been in foster care tend to benefit from. So oftentimes that support needs to come from the community or from other built networks that these young people experience. So that's a possible next step, is sort of fostering that process of creating supports and networks. A third possible next step is improving policy to better support ongoing needs. So what sort of legislation might we want to consider? What do we want to consider that could improve the ongoing needs of these young people past when foster care services tend to end, which for some states is 18, some states is 21, but oftentimes just isn't long enough to really make sure these young people are getting the start that they need in young adulthood. And fourth, finally, fostering interdependence rather than independence. A lot of time for these young people, we expect them to be independent at 18 or 21 when that's just not an expectation that we have for young people who aren't in foster care, who are continuing to receive support from their parents throughout their 20s, oftentimes into their early 30s. So how do we foster connection and interdependence rather than expecting young people who have had traumatic and difficult past circumstances to be even more independent than the young people who haven't had those experiences to be? So I think that I will stop there for now, and there's just quite a few references, but I think I will open it up for questions at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, hello everyone. This is Yvonne Unruh again, Director for the Center for Fostering Success. And our Q&A period is if you have questions, you can type them into the screen. We will read them out and have Dr. Salazar respond. So the first question that we have for you is, how might you use this information about predictors of dropout to create programs to better serve these youth?
Well, I think that you can look at a lot of the factors. I think that sometimes when we create programs, we either base it on sort of the resources that are most available, which obviously is an important thing to do, or what most intuitively seems like it might be helpful given our given what we know about young people who have been in foster care. But I think that if you use the, if you're looking at, for example, if you go back, and I know you can't do this because you don't have the webinar right in front of you or the PowerPoint right in front of you, but if you go back and look at some, for example, the various factors that predict disengagement, then this could really inform where you might want to start. So, for example, some of the factors that we saw today were important were satisfaction with college. So maybe one thing that you would want to do would be to really help, before young people decide on a college, really invest a little bit of time in helping them explore what would be a really good college fit for them. As you know, we have big universities, small schools, and those in different schools are fit young people in differently. So exploring that based on the fact that we know that college, satisfaction with college is going to be important. That came up, college connectedness. So if college connectedness, if young people, the more connected they are to their college, the less they're likely they are to drop out, then maybe we want to invest some time and figure out ways to make sure that young people are actually getting connected to their college. And this could be through supporting them in exploring extracurricular possibilities, intramural sports clubs, things like that. Another piece, several of the mental health factors came up, trauma, PTSD, mental health sort of pieces. This came up for quite a lot of factors, so if this is still something that's really interfering with college success, then you might want to invest some time or resources in ensuring that young people are having their needs met. Whereas on the other side of this, is if we had done this study and found none of these, none of the mental health factors really mattered, trauma didn't pop up as being significant, mental health didn't pop up as being significant, then we wouldn't really want to put very much of our resources into creating supports around that. So I just think that you can use this as sort of a good guideline for helping you figure out maybe what might be actually worthwhile for investing resources in.
Okay, thank you. Another question, which is similar but coming from a different angle. The question is, my campus-based support program for foster youth has a staff of 1, me, and I have minimal resources. Given the salient factors found in your research, where should I put my priorities for helping my students so that my support can have the greatest impact for them?
Right. Thanks for that question. So I think that one good strategy, and I think that this is something faced by any school that's trying to do this, any independent living program that's trying to do this. I'm not sure I've ever heard of a program that doesn't have limited resources. So I think that one good strategy is to have try to have a variety of supports that you offer, but then have referrals for other things that you can't provide. So I think that the needs of young people who have been in foster care are often really diverse, and really can be really comprehensive, or really sort of run the gamut compared to other students. And I think it's important to consider all of these needs. Consider all of the needs. Sort of try to be aware of the different areas that young people might need support in, whether you can meet those needs or not. And then focus on sort of the services or the few things that you can do very well. Maybe that's mentoring young people, maybe that's providing tuition or mission, whatever it is. Focus on some of the few things that you can do really well, and then make it a really concentrated effort to make good connections for referrals that you can offer for the areas that you can't support as well. For example, if your program, can't provide full tuition or mission, this could still be a really big challenge for young people, for many of the young people in your program. So if it's something that you can't do and you're aware that that's something that young people could need, try to make some community connections or scholarship connections or something like that, to where there's somewhere you can refer students for that help that you specifically can't provide. This could also be a mental health piece. For example, if your program can't really provide some of that more trauma-focused counseling or something like that young people sometimes need that isn't available in the student health center, and we know that this is a need that these young people have, but your program just can't provide it, then try to find some resources that you can connect them with that can help them with those things. And so one big one, though, I will make one more specific recommendation. A big factor that I hear come up a lot when I worked at the Independent Living Program and in this data and other interviews with youth is having a supportive, caring adult. This seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of research. And a lot of young people, as we've talked about, and as you know, don't have parents to turn to while they're in college. So one piece that colleges don't really usually have to worry about is this sort of recreating the parental role kind of piece. But it's something that a lot of these young people need. So I would say if they're this would probably be a good piece to focus at least part of your program's attention on, since this is something that a lot of these young people are missing.
Another question that's just come up is what kind of tools for program evaluation would you suggest for ensuring that we are really improving outcomes?
That's a great question. There's a lot of different ways that programs I feel like can do this. Some schools, and actually this might even be something, Yvonne, that you might even want to talk a little bit about, but some schools have found ways to use the the university data from students to be able to compare how their students are doing compared with the general student body to see how those are comparing, so that you don't have to burden students, for example, with surveys or something like that. But there's also a lot of other measures out there that you could, and it really sort of depends on what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, it's, you know, every school is going to have transcripts, so it should be relatively, you know, that's one way you can compare academic outcomes, is sort of looking at academic performance of young people and graduation and keeping up with classes, staying on track academically, things like that. But for example, if you're if one of the things that your program is trying to do is to increase caring adult support, then there are a lot of validated measures out there that look at caring adult support that you can use with your young people to see if, for example, the work that you're doing is improving their scores or their outputs on those different sorts of measures. So I think that using what you might already have access to at the school that you're at, and that looks a lot of different ways for different schools. There's different ways to access things like that. Is one option. But I think that people sometimes shy away from, you know, surveys and things like that. But what I've found through my work is a lot of times students feel like, oh, you actually want to know how I'm doing. You're listening. You want to know how I'm doing, and they don't really look at it as a burden. They look at it more as, oh, you're really interested in actually seeing how I'm doing and if what you're doing is working for me. So I think that not shying away from surveys or things like that, I would encourage that.
Okay, thank you. This next question is looking at the difference between the educational setting versus the support services. It says all the youth in your study enrolled in post-secondary education institutions. So their experiences would have included, 1, exposure to the campus or the educational setting, and 2, the supportive services and interactions with people. In your view, which factor benefits youth most? Is it the structure of the social setting or the relationships and the interactions with people?
That's a great question, and I'm going to say what you probably thought I would already say. I'm going to say both, and I'll say why. I think that both of those pieces are so important, and it's important to really pay attention and be aware of both of those pieces. I think supportive services and supportive interactions are important for so many reasons. They're important for meeting logistical needs. They're important for, you know, giving emotional support. They're important for I think, and it's more intuitive why they're important. You know, for example, if you need help figuring out where your housing is going to be. You don't have housing, then you need that supportive services piece to work that out. If you don't have housing, nothing else, you probably aren't going to be enrolled in college for very long. So those supportive services are key. But the sort of piece about that campus or environment setting, getting it integrated in the college environment is so important too. I really think of it as breaking out of sort of that child welfare services sort of shell. Hopefully I say this clearly. I guess I think of, the supportive services, they're so important, but they're still sort of simulating that child welfare system feel of sort of receiving support from a system, since you don't have those traditional, family supports or structure to do that. But college is also, really about breaking away or sort of forming your own identity, becoming part of something sort of bigger than yourself, pursuing, your interest in what you want to do for a career. And I think that's really where the importance of that environmental piece comes in, sort of getting involved in creating your career opportunities and whatever your identity will be sort of after college, after school. So I really think that both of them are really important.
Okay, next question is, based on your research, what are some great resources for post-college graduation for students from foster care?
Resources? That is a really good question, and I'm going to say there aren't very many of them. Once young people, and I'm just writing this down, sorry, so I can. A lot of time once young people age out of foster care, whether that's 18 or 21, a lot of the services really go away, and I'm actually not really aware, other than, for example, the campus support programs, of resources that continue going beyond foster care for supporting these young people. Usually the services are just general adult social services. And so when I mention that as being a recommendation, I wasn't implying by any stretch of the imagination that this is something that we're already doing or that we've already perfected. I think that this is an area that we don't really have a lot to offer in this area, and that we really need to think about and pursue to develop something around here, because we really don't have a lot.
Okay. Another question here is, do you know if the foster youth alums in your study received mental health services?
If they received, so the scholarship program, so I actually think I forgot to mention this. So the young people in my study, it was a national sample. They were at colleges all over the United States. So the scholarship program was open to all young people across the United States. They just applied. They had to do an essay, a couple of different things to apply. But they could be living anywhere across the United States. They could be going to any different school. The actual scholarship program itself didn't offer mental health services, but what they did offer was a V-mentoring program. So young people were paired with a mentor that they kept in touch with online. And then they also received care packages from the scholarship program. They were really connected with the scholarship program coordinator, who, when I was doing the survey, all knew her by name. They were really connected with her and had a really good relationship. So they had more of this sort of social support piece, but not specific mental health services through the scholarship program. Some of them received mental health services, for example, through student support services at their school, through the student counseling programs at their schools and things like that, but not specifically through the scholarship program.
All right, so we have just two more questions. And one is asking, was there any additional breakdown on ethnicity? And if so, did you see any differences?
That's a good question. I feel like I did break that down at one point, and I just don't have that information available right now. I did ask, let me see. I feel like I might have used the NIH classifications for race and ethnicity, but I'd have to go back and look at that. If the person who asked that question wants to contact me by email, I'd be more than happy to sort of do a little bit of back research on that and see what I found.
Okay. And our last question, how can community assist with retention of these high-risk students? Where would they best fit in this support structure?
Did you say where could the community?
Yes. How can the community assist with retention of these high-risk students, and where would the community best fit in this support structure?
I feel like there always needs to be someone sort of heading these efforts, and the thing I really like about independent living programs, you know, some states have really great independent living programs that they put a lot of time and effort into, and some states, to be quite honest, aren't very good. But the thing that's good about independent living programs is they're in every state, they're in so many communities, and they just reach so many different communities. So, and where I live in Oregon, we have a really great independent living program, and it seems like a really good place for the community to sort of put those resources together, because it's something that young people who have been in foster care can access before they go to college, when they're just sort of thinking about what they want to do. They can continue to access it while they're in college, and the independent living programs can really connect with the community to offer. For example, the independent living program that I worked at provided, you know, played a role in providing mentors for their community mentors for their young people. And the great thing, the other good thing about independent living programs that campus support programs can't always do, well, I sort of already said it, but you know, for campus support programs, a lot of times they don't reach the young people until they're already in college. Not for all of them. Sometimes some of them do some outreach for young people before they get to college. But sometimes the young people aren't really able to connect with these supports until they're already enrolled in college. And so that's the thing that I really like about the sort of potential of independent living programs, is they can sort of reach young people at the whole, so both before and during college. And so I think anytime a community is interested in supporting these young people, it's important to sort of find where you can base those things, so they can sort of be the centralized place where young people can go and access a variety of resources, rather than sort of being bounced around the community looking for different things.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amy Salazar, for starting off our Best Practice, Best Fit webinar series by the Center for Fostering Success. This webinar audio will be available to download later after this presentation. The information will be sent out following the webinar today. I just want a reminder out there for those researchers who have interest in sharing their research through this webinar series. My contact information is on this last slide, so please contact me with any ideas that you have. And our next webinar will be Dr. Peter Pecora, and that will be taking place on March 11th, 2014, starting at 2 o'clock. If you are not registered on the Fostering Success Google group, you can also email me, and I'll make sure that you get that information so you can get updates on Dr. Pecora's and other webinars that are up and coming. We thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope that you'll join us at our next webinar. Thank you.